Luminaries panel. People who have a strong personal connection with this lighthouse. And first of all, I want to introduce you to JoAnn Semones, who is our maritime historian and author. She's written 2 books specifically about Pigeon Point, and she has a new book out about coastal state parks along the area here. So feel free to talk to her after this. There will be a book signing, and so you can get lots of questions answered. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to JoAnn.
Great. Hi, everybody. So you're all having a good day today? Yeah. We couldn't have better weather, right? We're very pleased that this event is happening, the 150th anniversary of Pigeon Point Lighthouse. And, I wasn't sure we would be having a celebration this year, with the pandemic and with so many other things that have happened. Here we are. And what we decided to do was something a little extra special in many ways out here and all the activities you're taking part in. But inviting the folks you see here at the table, I've had the wonderful opportunity to meet a lot of people in writing all my books. And some of these folks I've now developed friendships with for years. Bob and his wife Serena, who's back there, they come to the anniversary every year. And so we get to talk about their families and we get to talk about the history here. I know, and so Bob Davis is this gentleman here. Down here is Jerry Jolley and his son Jeremy Jolley. And we will get into their backgrounds and reasons why they're here in just a minute. And this is Deanne Burns.
Lenny.
And we had, yes. What is the last name?
Lenny.
It's a new name. She just newly married.
Yes.
So again, but
again.
And then we have Bud Stevens and his family members as well. And so you want Daniel?
And Debbie.
And Debbie. Well, of course, how could I miss them? She was
Well,
born here.
Well, this is my first home.
Oh, we had to take her to San Francisco.
There's a picture of me.
Oh, fantastic. See, they're not even going to let me ask questions. They're ready to share now. All right. I like the enthusiasm. I love it. So we're going to kind of take this in, we want to make this very casual, very interesting for folks, but I did prepare a few questions for people just to kind of give you a sense of who they were and also to give them an opportunity to tell you their connection, their personal connection with the lighthouse. So we're going to start, we have a certain order because each of the folks here represents a particular period of time or era here at the lighthouse. And so I would like to kind of go chronologically for that reason. So right here, Bob Davis. I want to start by saying, okay, I know you're related to Keeper Jesse Mygrants. So, but how are you related?
My aunt Jessie Mygrants was raised here at the lighthouse.
And do you have, and when did he arrive at the lighthouse and what was his salary and some of his duties?
He arrived here in 1924 after transferring from Point Negrello in Southern California. He asked for the transfer because he wanted his 2 daughters to be closer to his school. And he was a second assistant when he first transferred out here, making $90 a month. And then he was promoted to first assistant, making $100 a month.
Wow. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that salary? Not that it's necessarily improved for California State Parks. I'm going to give them a boost there. But that was typical. They did a lot of hard work, for very little reimbursement. The good thing about this particular place was that at the time there was a beautiful home.
A 3-story home.
That's right. And it was a beautiful Victorian home. And so the keepers could have their families here.
Right.
And we also know that Jesse was here between 1924 and 1941. Some very interesting and some formative years. But we have some particular stories about experiences relative to Prohibition. So can you tell us about that, Bob?
The first one, rum runner came to the lighthouse one night and asked Jesse Mygrants, the keeper, for his card, and he refused. So the rum runner pulled a gun on him and said, "You're going to drive me down the coast," and drove about 8 or 10 miles down the coast and let him go. Second incident.
He was lucky, I mean,
real
they
lucky.
let him go.
The second incident was my Aunt Jessie and her sister Rosamond and 2 boys were coming back from a dance in Santa Cruz. And they got just about to the lighthouse, and the rum runners pulled the car over and wanted to know where they were going, what they were doing. And the girls said, "We live at the lighthouse." So they told them, they said, "Okay, go straight home and go to bed." And they went to bed, and all of a sudden they could hear the winch lifting the booze off the boat.
I remember that video and that you showed me, because it is one of the rare oral histories that we have about Pigeon Point. But she was saying they were audacious people, because you could hear the sound squeaking,
Yeah.
the squeaking of that, you know, that
The
that
winch, yeah.
as they were unloading their rum running boat, you know, using the derrick here at the lighthouse. So he was pretty lucky, I think, to have survived a lot of that.
Yeah, in the first incident, he didn't tell the family about it for 2 years so they wouldn't worry. He didn't want them to worry.
Yeah.
You know, it was a regular instance, you know, during that time, during Prohibition.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing. And any other little stories you want to tell us?
No, related to Prohibition, there's a picture, I don't have it with me, but it's a picture of my dad, another guy, and a bartender in Pescadero in Duarts. That was during Prohibition, and they were serving liquor then, so there was some payola going on there.
Now, I did bring some, they're not great photographs, but these are mostly photographs I think you gave me early on. But here's the family members at the beach, and Mygrants is off.
Toward the end down there, yeah.
Toward the end. And then back here, oh, is that
That's
the
the
photograph
picture,
that
that's
you
the one I
just-
told you, yeah. That
Okay.
it is.
We
That's
had-
behind my grandmother's house in Pescadero. That's the entire Davis family.
That's right, and that was in the 40s. And this is of the quality, sorry, my printer at home wasn't cooperating very well, but here's the family here, and there's Keeper Mygrants here in his uniform. And down here is the one Bob's talking about that was taken in the 40s. And what he just told me about today is this photo right here is of
Jesse Mygrants, my aunt. Yeah.
And-
And her husband, George Davis.
And I didn't realize that at the time you shared this with me. And then Bob has done a fantastic job of upgrading that DVD. And so there are some copies available in the bookstore for a small donation, if anyone's interested in that oral history. But he also included that particular photo of her as a young woman. So the next person I'd like to talk to, and we will come back and we'll have an opportunity for any other questions if people have them, is Deanne Burns. And Deanne and I have known each other for a while now too, you know, and I also knew her mother, Lorraine Spinelli. And Deanne is here because she represents a family that actually lost someone in a shipwreck here at Pigeon Point. And so it's kind of a bittersweet occasion.
It is.
For all of us because of that. But I also think it's important because that shipwreck was particularly significant. It was there's no other way to say this, but it was the worst shipwreck that ever happened here at Pigeon Point. And that was in 1929. And what happened was that this happened at midnight. The San Juan was a wooden steamship, and an oil tanker twice its size basically hit it amidships, and the ship sank in less than 5 minutes. And Deanne's grandmother was aboard the ship. So I wanted to ask you, Deanne, special memories you have or what you learned from your mother
Right.
about your grandmother.
Because my mother was 5 when my
Yes.
grandmother died. The basic story was that my grandfather, it was depression, so the only place he could find work was in Long Beach, and they hadn't seen each other for a while. So he bought her a ticket and said, just take the train down. And she said, oh, but the children need shoes, and it's cheaper for me to take the boat. So I want to take the boat because she and my uncle needed shoes. So she did go. My mother did tell me, this is kind of, she said, I was begging her not to go, Mommy, don't go. And she said we had a French doors between 2 rooms in our house, and it had panes like this. And she goes, I looked in one of the panes, and I saw a ship like this going in the water. So she goes, that was my one psychic thing I ever had. And she said, Mommy, please don't go. And she said, I'm going. She said the only thing that really gave her comfort was apparently my grandmother used to just faint at the drop of a hat. Fear, shock, anything. So she really hoped that either she wasn't awakened or she just woke up and was so frightened that she just fainted and went. And so, but my mom, eventually when my mom did pass away, and my dad, we took their ashes and we got a permit and we hired a captain to take us out, and she wanted her ashes out with her mom. So they're both out there now. So I have my grandchildren and my children, and so their great-great-grandmother. We just took them up and showed them her picture and everything, so.
Yes, and we do have a few items here too. We have in the Fog Signal building, if you haven't seen it already, we have lots of exhibits, and one particular section is about the San Juan and has a photo of your grandmother. And again, the quality may not be terrific, but she's the woman at the top.
Yeah, she was only 29.
29,
Yeah.
that's right, when it happened. And your mom was 5.
5, my uncle was 8.
And then there's the steamship, the San Juan, at the bottom. So all of these photographs, by the way, are in, many of them are in the exhibit in the Fog Signal building, but they're also in my books about Pigeon Point, if you're interested in seeing better quality versions of them. And when did you learn about your grandmother's death on a shipwreck? Were there always stories in your family?
Yeah, I think when my
about it,
sister
or-
and I both, yeah, my mother used to talk about her all the time, and my mom this and my mom that, and you could tell what a significant impact that it had on her growing up without a mother. Because her father was so busy just trying to make a living, and they were split up and passed around to all these different relatives and things. So, but she said she was very young when she married my grandfather. She was 18 and he was 35, because she had helped care for his first wife who passed away. So anyway, it's been an important thing in our family. I've always brought my children out here, and now my grandchildren. And the day that we went out and did my parents' ashes, some of us were on the boat, some of us were out, just out here, right here at the point. So it's always been a significant thing in our family.
And I've discovered more and more about the shipwreck over time. As usual, you write a book and then, and you interview people.
You find out more.
But then someone else comes to you and tells you something else, and so you find out more. So we've been able to add to that history over time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about your mother or your...
Well, she had a big fear of water.
Of course.
I mean, significantly, ocean, lakes, and eventually, of course, after my sister and I moved out, they got a pool. But she was very nervous about the pool, but eventually she did get in as long as she could touch the bottom, and if somebody else was there. It took a lot for her to get past that fear, which was completely understandable.
Stay in the shallow end.
Stay in the shallow end and make sure
Yeah.
that people were there with her when she got into it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing event, and it was rare for me to have the opportunity to speak to someone who had a major loss, and that always, for me, also highlights the importance of our maritime history here, because our maritime history is about people. And that's what this table is about today. It's about people. It's not just a tower by itself. It's about people and that history. And so we're grateful to have everyone here today. So Bud, I'm going to turn to you next, because you were in the Coast Guard in the 50s, right? 1953 to 1954, is that correct?
53 to, well, it was end of 52 to end of 54, yeah.
Can you hear him well enough, or do
Yeah.
That microphone's stable.
Or put the fuzzy in front of it? Is that? I need technical assistance when it comes to this.
That's so people can maybe hear you.
Yes.
It's a microphone.
You don't get to take that home, Bud. John wouldn't let me. So does he need his hand on it?
I would maybe hand him the mic too, so.
Yeah.
Okay. You just want to hold the mic? There you go.
Okay.
All right.
There we go, and just use
Talk
that.
now.
A little closer. Yeah, a
So-
little closer.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a try, and then, we can, thank God for the ability to do editing, because I know I'm not doing, I'm making my mistakes too today. So what was life like at the lighthouse when you were there, and what were some of your duties as a keeper when you were at Pigeon Point?
Well, you had to walk up and turn the light on and turn that off, and you had to sit in the office in there and make sure the radio was on and giving out a signal, or three signals out.
Can you tell us about the signals and what they meant? You were looking for ships, or
Yeah,
right?
the ships could decide where they're. We were on point, and there's three of us, and the ships could get a reading off there and tell exactly where they were. But we were on I forget a lot of things. Who were we on? You remember?
That's okay, we're here just to share whatever.
Alcatraz and this lighthouse right up here.
Point Arena?
Huh?
Point Arena?
No, the little lighthouse. Anyhow,
Point Montero.
yeah,
Yes, Point Montero.
yeah. And then we had to, you want to know, we had to go up and turn the light on every morning and wipe the lens down and sit by the radio. We had shifts where we sit by the radio and make sure your signal's going out. Every 20 minutes our signal had to go out, and then the next 20 minutes one of the other places went out, and in the third 20 minutes was the other one. I wish I could tell you the names, but I don't remember all those.
That's all right, but
Anyhow,
it's just,
that's how they could get
Was that the
there.
triangulation?
That's how they could get where they were on the map, is by our radio and market. Yeah.
And I also know that you had some kind of unusual experiences here relative to shipwrecks.
With what?
You found some tires from a shipwreck?
Oh, yeah, when they built that.
And that was, now that sounds funny, all right, tires from a shipwreck. Let me explain. In 1953, an experimental amphibious vessel called Bark 1, Barge Amphibious Resupply Cargo Ship 1, Bark 1, B-A-R-C 1, was being towed from Monterey to San Francisco. And unfortunately, the tugboat got ahead of the boat, and the ship sank. There were 3 crewmen aboard, and unfortunately all of them were lost. But what Bud told me in a story that we talked about a few years ago was that he found the tires
Oh, yeah.
of
About one tire.
because an amphibious unit, is what? It's like a tank on giant wheels, right?
Yeah.
And so he said those washed up on the beach, and you found them.
Yeah, right down, I don't know how far down there on the beach, but there's this tire, it must have been
9
over
feet?
6 feet high, 7 feet or something, great big,
9 feet.
huh?
9 feet, I think,
Was
right?
it? It was big, I'll tell you.
Yeah, see? So you can imagine whether that would.
But that was the one thing, that when the boat sank out there, that tire floated in here, and they come and picked it up a couple days later.
Wow.
It was an immense tire, And I guess they gave up on the amphibious thing after they tried to come up here with that.
I think you're right. They had, although it was a precursor to what I believe they called the LSDs during World War I. So it was experimental at the time, but they changed some of the design, made some modifications, obviously. And so that was used, those huge things were used during World War II. I'm sorry, not World War I, World War II. And they could carry a locomotive inside them.
Yeah, it was
And-
big.
Yeah, I mean, that's how huge they were.
I saw pictures, I never saw it, but I saw pictures, and then by seeing the size of the tire, you know, it was big.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I saw a picture once of a man about your, 6 foot plus tall, and standing next to it, and it was just gigantic.
Yeah.
And what other, can you remember any other unusual experiences you had at Pigeon Point?
We found counterfeit, people hid their equipment. Up this way, I can't tell you now, I forget all this stuff, but anyhow, they counterfeited bills, and then they hid the machinery under when the tide was low, they could get back under there, and they put that machinery back in there, and then somebody come along, and then I guess it was when the tide was low again, somebody go along there, come and told us that there's a bunch of equipment back under there.
So these were counterfeit machines, or
Yeah, they were
to make
counterfeits,
bills,
yeah.
counterfeit bills?
No, not the bills, but the machinery.
But the machinery to make them, so you never found any bills?
No.
That's too bad.
Anyhow, there was a lot of.
That would have been worth keeping, you know? But, and do you remember what parts you saw? I mean, could you tell whether they made $100 bills or $5 bills?
I didn't see any of the,
Oh, that was just a story you heard?
yeah, that was way out in the water, and I just saw
Wow.
the tire when it,
Uh-huh.
so.
Well, that's tremendous. Thank you very much. We'll come back for more questions. And then, I'm going to switch over here. Yeah, I know.
It's for you, I think.
That's for you.
Everybody's so polite, you know. I love that, I love that. So Jerry was also in the Coast Guard, and Jerry Jolley, and from 1973 to 74. Now, how long did you serve? It was just for a year here at the Lighthouse,
Oh,
Jerry?
at the Lighthouse, no, it was more like a year and a half.
Year and a half, okay.
Year and a half, 2
good.
years.
Uh-huh. And do you have a favorite story about being here?
Well, I guess I could tell the story about how I got here, and well, I'll abbreviate it a little bit. I was working on for the unit up at Point Arena, and the light station was still there, but they'd also put up a LRAN station, long range aid to navigation.
Yes.
And so there was a transition going on there, and I had been working at the electronics technician helper there in Point Arena, and I had maybe a little personality conflict with the officer in charge. He knew we were having a confrontation, but I didn't know we were having one. But
Because you were what, 18, 19?
I was 21
21, huh?
at that point in time, and I forget a little bit too. Anyway, what happened is he came in and said one day, he says, I've got a place for you. I'm going to transfer you down to Long Beach, and you'll just be scraping for the best assignment you can get, and there's not much there. I said, well, that's fine. And a couple of weeks later, he came in and he said, the transfer is successful, you're out of here. And I said, well, where am I going? And he says, you're going to some place called Pigeon Point. And I said, well, that's good. That's a good assignment. And he said, yep, that's it. End of story. And the next day, the phone rang, and it was one of my buddies that was in boot camp had seen my orders come across the desk, and they were shipboard orders. And I asked the officer in charge, I said, is this right? And he said, let me see those. And he says, no, this can't be right. I had orders for Pigeon Point Lighthouse. And so there I was with the best deal out of the day.
Wow.
And it went on, it got better from there. From then on, I had different adventures, you could say. You know, we got caught helping some people in a storm down here, and it's just like you say in the pictures. That, we lost his pickup truck, but we didn't lose him.
Well, that's good. Was this, how did that, tell us a little bit more about that.
Well,
story.
we had a storm on a winter's night, and it was cold.
Yeah.
But one of the fishermen was still out, and he'd fallen asleep, and most of the ropes had come apart. And so we went down with the pickup truck to just use it to get the truck out, but use it as an anchor point.
Wow.
And that's what happened, is it became a Coast Guard anchor point.
Wow.
Anyway, that was the adventures of the Pigeon Point Light Station. I stayed in the military, and I had quite a bit of training in medevac and helicopters, but I always referred back to the lighthouse. That was a special time in the military because I was able to have my family with me.
That's right.
Go ahead. The little girl on the end.
Hi.
She was 2 years old going in. The lady next to her, well, we won't say. She was younger than me. And yeah, there they are, dressed up to go to church. The school bus would come out here and stop, and the school bus would bring the kids home when it was after. One of the other people, there were 4 men that took care of the light. One of those people had grade school age kids. So. Oh, the one thing I better work towards ending is Jim Hanks's ducks. Jim was the officer in charge here, and I just reported to him. Remember, I just had that horrible experience with the assignment. It wasn't really horrible. Anyway, we went out at 8 o'clock in the morning to report, and here comes this fellow walking down the sidewalk, and he's got 2 ducks behind him.
I know this story.
He's moving towards the office. It was a souvenir shop that you guys went to. But those were the offices. He moved down, and the ducks just stopped outside the door and waited outside the door. And I said to Jim, I said, that's the weirdest watchdog I've ever seen. And he says they just come in one day and they've been here ever since, a couple of months. So we had 2 ducks, watchdogs.
Well, I remember because I was able to speak to Ann Hanks a few years ago, his wife. And she told me that story too, and it stayed with me. And the names of the ducks were Click and Clack. And they would follow him around everywhere.
They'd follow him home for lunch, and they'd wait out on the front porch.
And he also, Ann told me this too, she said one time there was an officer that came out and was inspecting or doing something on the premises. And she said, but Click and Clack went over and they each grabbed a pant leg and pulled on him. And she said, and because they didn't like him. And then she added, yeah, those ducks had good taste. So they were quite the characters, apparently, those 2.
Yeah, they were.
Now, also, you had a very interesting part in Pigeon Point's history. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? You were the last keeper.
I was the last official Coast Guard keeper.
That's right.
They had some civilians come in and change a few things, but as far as the military, I didn't really know I was being transferred down for that. But when I got there, we spent the next 2 years focusing on what was going to change and what the new lights and lights and sirens, I guess. 'Cause that was the other thing when we came assigned here. The fog signals were just ear piercing, and they were even with the house that we were assigned down on the end here. I asked him, says, could we get that changed? And I never seen the military work so fast.
Interesting.
They changed it, and we just enjoyed what was a good life then, and we knew that people were in situations that weren't as good, but we wanted them to enjoy their
Well,
time.
and speaking of that, by then, of course, the fourplex, the Victorian house was long gone.
Yeah.
But these bunkers were here, correct?
Yeah.
And were your family, can I tell them this?
Sure.
Jerry and his family are staying in Whale Cottage and have been there all week. Today is a birthday. Happy birthday, Jerry.
Thank you.
And so was that the same billet you had when you were here?
The only thing that's changed is the color of the paint.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And one other question, Jerry. I remember when we had these conversations, and then I went and looked up some of the records, and you had a final log entry when you left here, and you said, placed light and fog signal in operation, station secured and automated. So you were part of a very specific era then. How does that feel to you?
Well, it feels, I enjoy being where I'm at and having served in the Coast Guard like that. And it's a sentimental time. I don't know if I can jump over that sentimental rock, but I enjoyed being here, especially, and also my rest of my military career. I was in Saudi Arabia on April or September rather, and then well, I won't go into all that, but it's a special place.
Yeah.
Pigeon Point, the Pigeon Point family, and I'm surprised to see all the names in the amphitheater out there. If you haven't walked out and looked at that, you should. Mm-hmm. Those are the family names that give them a place in history too.
That's right. And I forgot to show a couple of pictures here, but I did want to show Bud. This is a picture I think your wife sent me when I was telling that story about you. And here's Bud and his wife.
And Debbie.
And Debbie. That's right, that's Debbie. So that's a fantastic photograph. And here is a photograph taken of what Pigeon Point looked like during the 50s. So you can see everything was still there, the house was still there. And then this was the bark that we talked about with the big tires and the amphibious unit. And then here I wanted to show, and I have a little story I'm going to tell about it too. But this is Jerry's work jacket. And it is in our fog signal building as an exhibit. Here's a picture of Jerry and the jacket before it was in there. And the story about it is, there are actually two pieces of it. One that's current and one that when I first talked to you. But Jerry and I had talked, and I was writing a story and we were putting things together, and then I was working on the exhibit in the fog signal building. I was commissioned to do that. And I get a phone call after we've been talking about your history and your story here and so on. I said, JoAnn, I have this jacket my wife wants me to get rid of. And you said, if I don't, can I send it to you? If I don't, it's just going to get thrown away or something. I said, no, you can't do that. To me, that's an historic item, right? It's an artifact. And so I had no idea what it would look like, but he sent it to me. And what I love about it, and you can't see it very well here, but you can in the fog signal building, is that there are actual paint stains on the jacket. This is his work jacket.
Yeah.
So to me, it really takes you back in time. And I have to admit, I tried it on, it fit me beautifully. Came that close to keeping it myself. But we donated it, you know, as you know, we filled out paperwork and donated it to California State Parks. But what I found amusing about, and that's why I wanted to tell you this story, is that in recently talking to you, you said, gee, it'd be great if my son could, Jeremy, could try the jacket on. I didn't have the heart to tell him it was encased in plastic. And that wouldn't be possible today. But it's just a beautiful artifact and relic. And so I did mean to also ask both of you about the photographs you brought. Can you tell us, Bud, a little bit about the photographs there?
No, what?
Debbie probably.
Well, but he made them.
Oh,
She wants you to talk about the pictures.
Or either any of you, if you want. Can you just tell us a little bit about what they are?
You want,
this is got along good.
That's good.
We did a lot of things we weren't supposed to do and everything. Yeah.
And then Jeremy, I noticed you brought some photographs there too. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, my mom had these done up, and one thing that's neat is a lot of these are current still backgrounds, still standing, right? So, when my mom walks into the building, as we're lucky enough to stay here, as you pointed out, her eyes kind of light up, and she says, "This is where we had the Christmas tree, and this is where the desk was, and such." So it's neat especially for her and my brother Justin, sister Jennifer, who are in these photos to relive that. But these are a couple photos from Christmas time.
Oh.
And some different times of the year when they were celebrating and doing everything. And my mom pointed out too that I think that's the same table still there. So from the late 70s to now, it's still standing.
Oh
And so,
my goodness.
yeah. And I won't elaborate too much, but yeah, it's just neat too. You point out, which is great. It's all about the people here, but the experience is very unique because, if you think about past, present, and future, you have between your book and then the opportunity to come stay as a hostel. It's a very unique connection and place that you can do that. So that's kind of a living example of that, and obviously the great memories these guys have had.
That's fantastic. And I have one final thing I would like to do.
Oh, thank you.
What, we got an album?
I don't think it's an
The
album.
picture.
I'm thinking it's a picture.
And if you would turn them over and open them. I didn't get them. Now there is glass in there, but there is something on it. Just be careful, a little careful when you open it. I brought you a slide. And you want to, when you can you all sort of show it to everyone, and then I'll read you what it says. I don't even want to hold up that piece. So here's what we say. On the occasion of the 150th anniversary of Pigeon Point Light Station, State Historic Park, this certificate of appreciation is presented to each one of these individuals as one of Pigeon Point's Lighthouse Luminaries for contributing your life experiences for all of us to hear, to feel, to treasure. Through you, we are able to touch the past and understand that a lighthouse is not just a tower of brick and mortar. It is a keeper of human stories, your stories. Thank you for being here and for sharing your part of Pigeon Point's history. November 12th, 2022.
Thank you, JoAnn, for the opportunity for myself to be here and my family. It was very important for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, time to take a break then. Thank you all so much.